The cursory remarks of the large-minded stranger, of whom he knew absolutely nothing beyond a mere commonplace name, were sublimed by his death, and influenced Clare more than all the reasoned ethics of the philosophers. His own parochialism made him ashamed by its contrast. His inconsistencies rushed upon him in a flood. He had persistently elevated Hellenic paganism at the expense of Christianity, yet in that civilization an illegal surrender was not certain disesteem. Surely then he might have regarded the abhorrence of the unintact state, which he had inherited with the creed of mysticism, as at least open to correction when the result was due to treachery. Remorse struck into him. The words of Izz Hewitt, never quite stilled in his memory, came back to him. He had asked Izz if she loved him, and she had replied in the affirmative. Did she love him more than Tess did? No, she had replied. Tess would lay down her life for him, and she herself could do no more. He thought of Tess as she had appeared on the day of the wedding, how her eyes had lingered upon him, how she had hung upon his words as if they were a god's. And during the terrible evening over the hearth, when her simple soul uncovered itself to his, how pitiful her face had looked by the rays of the fire, in her inability to realize that his love and protection could possibly be withdrawn. Thus, from being her critic, he grew to be her advocate. Cynical things he had uttered to himself about her, but no man can be always a cynic and live, and he withdrew them. The mistake of expressing them had arisen by his allowing himself to be influenced by general principles to the disregard of the particular instance. But the reasoning is somewhat musty. Lovers and husbands have gone over the ground before today. Clare had been harsh towards her, there was no doubt of it. Men are too often harsh with women they love or have loved, women with men. And yet these harshnesses are tenderness itself when compared with the universal harshness out of which they grow, the harshness of the position towards the temperament, of the means towards the aims, of today towards yesterday, of hereafter towards today. The historic interest of her family, that masterful line of d'Urbervilles, whom he had despised as a spent force, touched his sentiments now. Why had he not known the difference between the political value and the imaginative value of these things? In the latter aspect her d'Urberville descent was a fact of great dimensions. Worthless to economics, it was a most useful ingredient to the dreamer, to the moralizer on declines and falls. It was a fact that would soon be forgotten, that bit of distinction in poor Tess's blood and name, and oblivion would fall upon her hereditary link with the marble monuments and leaded skeletons at Kingsbere. So does time ruthlessly destroy his own romances. In recalling her face again and again, he thought now that he could see therein a flash of the dignity which must have graced her grandams, and the vision sent that aura through his veins which he had formerly felt, and which left behind it a sense of sickness. Despite her not inviolate past, what still abode in such a woman as Tess outvalued the freshness of her fellows. Was not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? So spoke love renascent, preparing the way for Tess's devoted outpouring, which was then just being forwarded to him by his father, though owing to his distance inland it was to be a long time in reaching him. Meanwhile the writer's expectation that Clare would come in response to the entreaty was alternately great and small. What lessened it was that the facts of her life which had led to the parting had not changed, could never change, and that if her presence had not attenuated them, her absence could not. Nevertheless, she addressed her mind to the tender question of what she could do to please him best if he should arrive. Sighs were expended on the wish that she had taken more notice of the tunes he played on his harp, that she had inquired more curiously of him which were his favourite ballads among those the country girls sang. She indirectly inquired of Amby Seedling, who had followed Liz from Talbothays, and by chance Amby remembered that amongst the snatches of melody in which they had indulged at the dairyman's to induce the cows to let down their milk, Clare had seemed to like Cupid's Gardens, I Have Parks, I Have Hounds, and The Break o' the Day, and had not seemed to care for The Tailor's Breeches and Such a Beauty I Did Grow, excellent ditties as they were. To perfect the ballads was now her whimsical desire. She practised them privately at odd moments, especially The Break o' the Day. Arise, 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 and pick your love a posy, all o' the sweetest flowers that in the garden grow, the turtle-doves and small birds in every bough a-building, so early in the Maytime, at the break o' the day. It would have melted the heart of stone to hear her singing these ditties whenever she worked apart from the rest of the girls in this cold, dry time, the tears running down her cheeks all the while at the thought that perhaps he would not, after all, come to hear her, and the simple, silly words of the songs resounding in painful mockery of the aching heart of the singer. Tess was so wrapped up in this fanciful dream that she seemed not to know how the season was advancing, that the days had lengthened, that Lady Day was at hand, and would soon be followed by Old Lady Day, the end of her term here. But before the quarter-day had quite come, something happened which made Tess think of far different matters. She was at her lodging, as usual, one evening, sitting in the downstairs room with the rest of the family, when somebody knocked at the door and inquired for Tess. Through the doorway she saw against the declining light a figure with the height of a woman and the breadth of a child, a tall, thin, girlish creature, whom she did not recognize in the twilight till the girl said, "Tess." "What? Is it 'Liza Lu?" asked Tess in startled accents. Her sister, whom a little over a year ago she had left at home as a child, had sprung up by a sudden shoot to a form of this presentation, of which as yet Lu seemed herself scarce able to understand the meaning. Her thin legs, visible below her once long frock, now short by her growing, and her uncomfortable hands and arms revealed her youth and inexperience. "Yes, I have been traipsing about all day, Tess," said Lu with unemotional gravity, "a-trying to find 'ee, and I'm very tired." "What is the matter at home?" "Mother is took very bad, and the doctor says she's dying, and his father is not very well neither, and says 'tis wrong for a man of such high family as his to slave and drave at common labouring work, and we don't know what to do." Tess stood in reverie a long time before she thought of asking 'Liza Lu to come in and sit down. When she had done so, and 'Liza Lu was having some tea, she came to a decision. It was imperative that she should go home. Her agreement did not end till Old Lady Day, the 6th of April, but as the interval there too was not a long one, she resolved to run the risk of starting at once. To go that night would be a gain of 12 hours, but her sister was too tired to undertake such a distance till the morrow. Tess ran down to where Marian and Izz lived, informed them of what had happened, and begged them to make the best of her case with the farmer. Returning, she got Lu a supper, and after that, having tucked the younger up into her own bed, packed up as many of her belongings as would go into a withy basket, and started, directing Lu to follow her the next morning. End of chapter 49.